Mm-mm.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Marriage is Tougher Than Woodpecker Lips podcast. We have a very special guest for you today, but before we get into that, we want to thank you real quick for tuning in. You will notice that I have a little bit of a different background here. We are in New Orleans, Louisiana, in the beautiful Royal Sonesta Hotel, and we are, well, Paul's in Ohio still, but I'm sitting here with our very, very old, long-term friend. I wasn't gonna call you old,
because that
we've
dates
been friends
both
for a
all of
long
us.
time. Yeah. So we planned this trip a while back and thought it would be a great idea, since he is also married, to pick his brain a little bit about his marriage and see if we can learn something from him. So, welcome to the podcast for the first time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And hopefully we can get you on again. But before we do that, we wanted to talk about compromise, right?
Yes. That's been the key to my marriage, my relationship. Pretty much everything I do in life, right? Compromise. As a teacher, you compromise. So you bring that stuff home with you and you learn those lessons. Um, you can't always have what you want. You're not always going to get, your way. But if you give a little, you'll find that your partner's willing to give a little, and that's how things work. That's how you make things work, by trying to figure out what you both need instead of what you both want, and what you both can do instead of what you both want. Those are the keys to success for us, at least.
I guess.
Man, I love that. And before we go deeper, let's have you. We generally ask a couple questions so that the audience can get to know you. After you gave that little tease of what we're going to get into, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us how long you've been married?
Well, I'm Blair. I've known Brian and Paul since what? Seventh grade. Seventh grade, right?
Not for me. We met in high school.
Okay, we met in high school. Oh, yeah, we met in high school.
I was a transplant from
yeah.
a different school.
So met Paul then in seventh grade, especially
eighth
grade.
Yeah.
And what? So I met my wife at Banana Joe's, man. The other one was going to date us. That really dates us, right? Because that place is not just not standing anymore. It is completely erased from history. Okay. But I met my wife there. I was in college. She was working at the bank. And to be honest, that's really where the compromise started, because after I met her, I ended up going to college, and we had to find a way to make, dating work back then, which was me going back and forth and her dealing with the fact that I'm starting a new relationship with someone who isn't local, so there was compromise straight from the start. But we met, she had a little boy who was 2 at the time. He's now 22 years old. Whew. And we've just been trying to make things work.
Yeah, that's awesome. How long did you talk about dating? How long did you guys date before you were married?
That's a story. Because honestly, the dating is longer than the marriage. We got married. Well, we've only been married for 7 years now. And we've been together 20 years. So 13 of those years not married. But there's a lot of testing there. A lot of unsureness. The financial collapse happened, which made us, change our plans, which actually relocated us from Pennsylvania to Florida.
Right.
During all that time. So there was a lot going on that we had to overcome, work together with to, find our new footing. And we got to Florida, we got a base settled, we finally got married. So it was like 13 years of a lot of life.
Man, yeah, that's a foundation to build on for sure. Another question we always ask is, what is the best thing about being married?
The security, even as a big dude, and people take it for granted all the time. People see a big dude and they see toughness. They see that, you're strong, you can handle your own. That's great. But emotionally, you're not always there, you know, and you need someone to ground you. And that's where that marriage comes in at, and you go home at the end of the day, you're stressed out, work's frustrated you, life's frustrated you, you won't, your head's not straight. When you come home, you have a security. She's there to bring you back down, you know, to bring you back down to the ground, to let you know that, this is home base. Everything's all right. That's your sanctuary. That's where you can get back to self, to go on and do anything else that you need to do.
Yeah,
Man,
we
so
talked about that quite a bit. Like recently, in like last couple months episodes, me and my wife now are in counseling. Me mostly, just we're actually, well, as a couple, we're working on communication. I thought it was going to be mostly me, but what I learned through that is that she had a little bit of work to do as well. Um, we're mostly learning at the moment how to receive each other,
Yeah.
right? And because we have different communication styles, so it can be tough sometimes, right? I can say something that sounds appropriate in my head, and she takes it and gets offended. I'm like,
Yeah.
all I said was this, like you just said it again.
Yes.
And like I'm a very direct to the point type of dude, right? So a lot of times if I communicate something to her, it might sound like I'm talking down to her,
Yeah.
and it's just because of the relationship. Now, if I were to do that at work, that's just a understood thing, and
Yeah.
people take it for what the words mean. At home, she's like, "Yo, you're not my dad. Chill."
Right. Right. Yeah.
no, that's good too. I mean, you said so many things that was good about being married, and that your wife is pretty awesome, which we know. But
She is.
what's your favorite characteristic of your wife?
It's, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. So I'm like, should she see this, or should she not see this? But she's got such a drive. You know, I'm a laid back person by nature. Coming from where I come from, being under as much stress as I've been under growing up, I developed, you know, a life philosophy, just being laid back. It's been too stressful. She's a driver, though. When if she starts a project, she's going to finish it. Someone needs Halloween costumes made up. She'll make them. She won't even charge you for it. She'll make it scratch. She'll go out. She'll buy all the materials. She'll put a whole Halloween costume together. It looks like you got it from the Halloween store. But she puts it together. You got a baby shower. She'll put all the decorations together. You need something painted, a painting project, she'll sit down, she'll do a project, she'll put it all together. She has such a drive. She's very task oriented. From start to finish, she's going to get the job done. And she's that person because of my laid backness. She's able to push me, even though I'm like a kid kicking and screaming, fussing and fighting, trying to go the other direction. She's still willing to push me, her little self, little 4'10" self, pushing me, this big giant man, to do what I need to do. And you need that. I need that. I need to be pushed. I recognize that. As much as I may resist, I still need to be pushed. And she's willing to push, and so it's not a job that a lot of women, would sign up for, or a lot of people will sign up for, but she's accepted it, and that's her role. We kind of counteract each other, she's the pusher and I'm it's all right, chill, we're laid back, we'll get it done. So we find that balance, even there, there's that compromise, right? She's one side, I'm the other.
Man, you out here like you've spoke before,
I know.
wrapping that theme into all the things like you're a teacher or something.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
what is this is the last question before we hop in the episode? But what is or what has challenged you in being married?
um I mean, everything's a challenge, you know. Finding, even though I'm a laid back person, and I think I have patience, you know, sometimes I do get a little bit, irritated, you know. Um, if you fight with someone, you can just walk away. You're good. It's over. Walk away, do your thing, go my way, go your way, I go my way. When you're married, though, you can't just walk away. You upset each other. You got to figure it out. You got to find a way. Your short sightedness or your temperament. Whatever the issue was that caused you to have that argument, you have to resolve it. So that's the biggest challenge, finding face with someone who you just fought with, who just, drove you crazy 5 minutes ago, that you got to make dinner together, you know, or, you got to get up, you got to go to your daughter's friend's birthday party, and you got to work together. That's the biggest challenge, eating your way through your own emotions, eating your way through your anxieties, eating your way through whatever issues you got going on, and going about your day, making all that stuff work. That's the biggest challenge.
Bro, you just said so much. That was so
Facts.
so good and so real. That is marriage in a nutshell. That's really good. Um, so now, just moving on to the topic, you've already woven it into everything that you said. Um, let me just before we do that, how long have you been teaching?
10 years now.
Okay, so yes,
Yeah.
y'all, when you hear lessons and knowledge being dropped, it's because that's what he does, and it's a part of who he is, which is amazing. So, yeah, just talking about compromise, you've already hit a couple pieces, talking about the differences in personalities, the difference in makeup, the difference in background. I mean, and that's something we really talk about as on the show is just how do we communicate through those challenges and how do we make space and offer up our best selves in our
Yes.
marriages, in our differences. So I'll just let you keep talking because it sounds good. And that's Brian. You have any specific questions about how to make that work?
I don't know if I have a specific question yet, but I know this is, like I said, we're in marriage counseling right now. And it's not so much like, and I keep saying this on the podcast, it's not like our marriage is broken or anything like that.
Yeah.
We wholeheartedly believe in, maintenance. We talk about, taking your car to the shop to get the oil changed and, get the tune up and make sure your windshield wipers
Right.
fluid is full and all that, right? Getting the brakes checked, right? Talk about getting the brakes checked. You need to know when to slow down sometimes.
Yes.
Especially in the space you're talking about. If you're in an argument or whatever, can't just, go at each other and then think everything's going to be fine 5 minutes later.
Right.
And like I said earlier, you got to know how to receive each other. You got to know how to talk to each other. And that's one of my biggest things right now is learning how to meter the things I say. And that's not like, well, I'm going to exclude this part of what I'm trying to tell her. It is more, I know I need to say it in a certain way so she can hear me, right? Because if she starts getting triggered or starts reacting, then she's not going to hear what I'm trying to say, and vice versa. So a lot of the way I learned that she has been communicating with me triggers me simply because of her tone, right? And so then if I start getting triggered, like I'm no longer listening to her, and it sets us back time-wise, just trying to accomplish whatever it is we're trying to get done. There's been plenty of times where I've had to like just step away from the conversation, say, you know what, I need 15 minutes back. And even before that, if I learned to do that, I would just walk away and we wouldn't talk for like a day or two. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
And
Wait, how long have you guys been married?
Let's see, this year is gonna be 6 years in September.
Yeah.
But we're together for
I used to be that same way, right? I did, where I figured the best way to handle when I was upset, whenever, because I know myself, you always got to know yourself, You know, that's what we've been taught since we've been growing up. You know, control your emotions, control your anger. So I always thought that walking away was simply the best way to handle it. You know, and this is what can you argue against? The argument's over.
Right.
You know, it's over. I'm gone. I'm in a different room. You're doing your thing. You can't be upset anymore. The argument's over. Whatever issue that we were arguing about, I walked away from. So clearly it doesn't matter. And that was from my perspective. And I never, but for a long time, for a long period of time, I didn't think about the effects on the other person. You know, it was just for my sanctity, for my safety, just walk away. You know, but you know, through time, through talking, you know, and not always at the same time either. You know, sometimes it was you talk about something one day, and then you follow with that subject the next day, and then 2 weeks later return back to that subject, and something new comes out. But putting all that information together, it became clear that on her side, when you just walk away, it's kind of like severing ties,
Right.
you know, and that's devastating to the other side because they're left thinking, what the hell's going on? Like, what just happened? You know, clearly he still has emotions about what's going on, even though in my head, I'm like,
Right.
I'm out. You know, the argument's over, it's done. But in her head, it's all those lingering questions. You know, it's why was he so upset? Why is he so upset that he just abruptly stopped it and ended it? And why hasn't he said anything to me for the last 2 days? And so my issue, no matter how big or small that it was left to her interpretation, which, you know, begins to spiral. You know, the longer you don't talk, the more that spirals and grows. And we would end up, and the kids feel it, you know, and we would end up, you know, me sleeping on the couch or, you know, some telltale sign that there was some sort of issue,
Right.
which is at the end of an argument, there shouldn't be those telltale signs that there's an issue. You know, at the end of the argument, you should have some sort of resolution. So, and that's where I began to shift. But the key was, and the marriage counselor said this to me when I moved here to Florida, and I told her about my issues. She said, what's going on? I said, she goes, how long have you been married? I said, 8 years. She goes, well, that's a problem. She goes, after that 7-year marking period, for some reasons, couples tend to face that tension, you know, it's that tension level building up, building up, building up. And we're on that 7-year marking period where things just start to build up and you end up either in counseling or, you know, things spiral out of control. But for us, we ended up in counseling. You know, things didn't spiral out of control. We just ended up in counseling. We ended up moving, which greatly shifted our communication skills because it went from, you can't just walk away anymore, you know, because she can't go to her mom's. You can't go to your mom's. You know, you can't go to your best friends. She can't go to her best friends. You're in Florida. You're stuck together. So now you got to work it out. Now you got to figure all this stuff out. You know, the compromise is not just some big thing. It was what we were forced to do when we were isolated from everyone else. You know, we came down here, you know, fractured. We did. We came down to Florida fractured. You know, we had to pick up all those pieces. We had to humble ourselves, you know, mute our emotions and figure out our issues. And it wasn't an easy process. You know, it took, you know, at least 2 years just to work through all that thick, you know, forest of issues that we had. You know, sometimes it hurt. You know, your feelings were hurt, you know, and you're wondering, you know, was this a mistake? What happened? You know, but you just keep going forward and you see yourself through. And because we had both committed to moving to Florida, we didn't know at the time because we were going through our issues, but we had both committed to move to Florida with each other. We were willing to work out our issues, even if we didn't see it at the time.
Right.
You know, we just had to get through those actual issues. You know, like you have that will, now you got to do the work. We put the work in, and, you know, 2 years later, things started to turn back around, you know, and Aria was born, which forced us to communicate even more, you know, and things began to even look brighter. It was like, okay, we got this, we can do this, you know, this is why we came here together. But yeah, it's, you know, people think that it's like a straight line, for marriage, and they think that, you drop on a knee, you propose, get married, buy a house, you do everything right. If you do everything right, things are going to go right. You forget that, life is not, that's not life.
Right, we're human.
Right.
Like you got to be willing to twist and turn, you got to be willing to give, you got to be willing to listen, you got to be willing to have your feelings hurt a little bit too, because, you know, your direction may not be the right direction, and she might see something just a little bit different. And if you're like me, who you put so much stake in, your manhood and what direction you're going in, for someone to tell you that you need a little bit of course change, can really hurt you. It can really make you feel like I'm not the man that I thought I was, you know. But you gotta be willing to change. You gotta be willing to listen, and soften your approach. Me, being 270 pounds, I've learned, the hard way that you got to soften your approach. Like my kids teach me that in school, my daughters teach me that at home, and my wife has told me that the same, that the way that I look, the way that I carry myself in my head, I'm a goofy dude. In my head, I'm singing, songs from the Labyrinth. I'm singing Hamilton in my head. I'm doing all these things, but my approach on the outside, it's not that. My approach on the outside is NWA. And even though I don't feel that way, people interpret it that way in many instances. So, just like you said, soften my approach to the point where I understand how I'm projecting myself to other people and how they perceive me, has helped me compromise a lot too.
Man, you said, just listening to your story, which was, I appreciate you just sharing all that with us. Um, but it just sparked a question. Like, you were in counseling, working out this tough stuff for 2 years. How did you hold on in those times, like in those really tough
She did.
times?
She did. She did. She fought. Like, she fought. She was like, we're not going to let this go. She was able to see, the whole thing, before I was.
Mm.
Me, like I said, I'm a laid back dude. I'm a laid back guy, and growing up the way that I grew up, you had to be willing to separate from things. You had to be willing to give something up, even something that you love dearly, an opportunity that you really wanted. You had to be willing to say, this is just from my perspective, just from me growing up. But I thought I had to be willing to say, I'm done with it. When I felt like the emotions were too much, if I felt like the baggage was too much to carry, in my head, I had to just be willing to ditch it. But she fought through that, like I said, and that was, again, her changing my course in life, where she saw that, no, you can work through this. This is not like your childhood. This is not like your teenage, years. This is different. I'm here. Things are different now. And she was able to correct my course, just like I just said, as a man, I felt like, what, this baggage is too much. Let me just walk away from this. I don't need this drama. I don't need this stress. We can do co-parenting, we can do all that stuff. But in her head, it was, what are you talking about? This is our family unit. We don't give this up ever. This is us. We work through this. We put the hard work in if we love each other. She was able to change my course, push me in that right direction, and hold on to me until I finally saw the image that she was projecting. And I was like, and again, I was real stubborn about it. It wasn't an easy thing for me to fall into, but just talking, communicating with her, really, it took me to see her softening side that I never really had embraced, because I love the woman. I love the job that she did, but I didn't really care about her heart.
Mm.
Could care less, at that time. I didn't think that I had any stock in that. And you could call from growing up as a kid, growing up in the environment that I grew up in, where we didn't share emotions, where if you barely saw your mom's emotions, you could chalk it up to that, or you could just chalk it up to my stubbornness as a man, and not willing to see anything in a woman. But the truth of the matter is that I had to see her soften for me to really realize that I had to soften myself and embrace her. She was able to embrace me before I was able to embrace her. But her persistence allowed me to see, that feeling, that love, that emotion that I hadn't seen before.
It's getting a little loud in here as the lobby's starting to liven up. So, man, you're dropping some knowledge. So, some big knowledge. So, unfortunately, I think it's probably in our best interest to cut this a little bit short. But I certainly want to get you back on the pod because I feel like you have a lot more to share and would be very beneficial to our listeners.
For sure.
Probably squeeze out maybe another couple of minutes here, but man, you just made me think about all the things that I've gone through in my relationship with my wife before and during our marriage, right? Made me think about some of the books I've read where, they mentioned, what drives a man is a woman, right? We are typically as successful as we are because of the woman that is in our lives.
Yes, that is so true.
I don't know that I would be as motivated as I am if it weren't for my wife, right? Because to some extent, like, I really only need what I need to survive, right? But when you have a wife and when you have a family, you suddenly have this drive to flourish and be a provider.
That's so funny because she says that to me all the time. She says, if I left you alone, you'd have a fork, a plate. You wouldn't have a knife. So you wouldn't even try to cook on that plate. And it's so true. What you just said is 1,000% true. I am driven, by her, by the family. If it wasn't for them, I'd be out there with my brothers. I'd be a knucklehead. What would I care about?
Right.
Like they are my grounding system. They are what keep me here. What keeps me going. And for me, it's all first. Because coming from where I come from, there was no other part. So there's no expectation. When I was growing up, I didn't have any expectations about being a teacher. I could care less. And having expectations about owning a house, care less. Did not. My mom, to this day, boy, do you understand that how much you were against having children? And now you take me to a party, all the kids are hanging out by me.
Yeah.
We're playing volleyball, we're in the water at the beach. All the kids are with me, and it's not me. It's the family that has brought me to this point, and that's that course change. My whole life has been a compromise. It has not been what I envisioned what life would be, but this is so much better than what I envisioned life would be. Life will, this has depth. Like when you go home, the end of your day is like the end of your day. And you go home, it's just begun. And I've already been through so much at work, that when I go home, my day has just gotten started. But that's not an easy thing though, because again, as a teacher, you like these last few years, people outside the education system have a hard time.
Hold on one second.
Cut that out.
But these last few years, though, going through COVID, having the kids out of school, having them home, I did homeschooling for my entire county. I did my school and I did all my high schools for U.S. history. Okay, and then in the summertime, I did summer school. When we got out of COVID, and so after all of that, when we got out of COVID, I did homebound teaching on top of teaching. Or my homebound teaching is a job where I would go to another student's house, a student who couldn't go to school. This kid, he had lost his kidney. He was having kidney surgery to replace it. And so he couldn't be in school because he had no immune system. So I would go to his house one-on-one, teach him, not just history. I taught him for 2 years. So I taught him geometry, taught him algebra, taught him U.S. history, taught him economics, taught him biology, taught him earth space science. I was his high school, and that would be after my regular job. So I would go to work, go to his house, and then go home. And what I realized that is that I was putting so much effort and energy to what was going on at work that things at home were falling apart. And I was talking to you yesterday about Aria, and Tia was a blessing. Tia was, just she's perfect at everything. She got great grades and never had to push her about homework, never had to yell at her about, staying at a friend's house. There's never been an overnight drinking. There's never been, none of that stuff's happened. It's almost like we had no high school at Tia. It's just like you just go straight through. But we took it for granted because Aria, on the other hand, you know, she needs that attention. She needed that attention, and me being at work, and with my kids, and like I said before, I never wanted kids, but now all the kids, right? But dedicating so much time to work, dedicating so much time to after school, home fell apart. And the attention that Arya needed was lacking. And it took a lot to see that, my day is just beginning when I get home. I got to regather up all that energy, because like I said, I'll be damned if I'm going to spend more energy at work than I do on my family, right? But I had to, come to that realization that I was failing on that end, and that I did need to give my daughter that individual attention, that I do need to work with her and be her daddy when I get home. I can't just, go into my own little world to recess. I have to be right back on it. And that's a challenge, and that's a challenge that we're working on now. That's our new challenge. We're always challenging ourselves. That's our new challenge, getting our daughter on board so that she understands she has a support system. She understands, we're helping her develop her concepts about prioritization, how to prioritize things, how to get your things in order. We're developing those concepts now. So that's a Michelle and I job that we're doing, which allows us a chance to communicate with each other, to bounce ideas off each other. But, picking her up and getting her on the right foot is, man, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work outside of work.
Yeah.
Man,
Dang.
bro, so good. So good. Yeah, you just, you really just dropped a lot of nuggets there, man. That's good encouragement for the rest of us, right? Just what
Right.
you've been through, how you are partnering with your wife to do those things. I do have a question though. I think we all, we're agreeing like, yeah, our wife gives us a drive and helps us to be better, but I think our wives unlock who we really are supposed to be, minus what we went through, right? Like we're innately a person, and then we experience things or things happen to us that we have these coping mechanisms. So we say, oh, because of the way we grew up or that's how we are right now. But I feel like our wives, would you agree that our wives give us the freedom to be who we truly are?
Yeah. I mean, as long as you got a good wife,
Yeah.
you know, as long as you have a good wife, yeah. Because it's so much work, it really is. Um, you know, as long as your wife's not one of those people who, and it's not reality, it's what you see on TV, but I can fix them up type people, because if you have a relationship where you're going to be thinking, I can fix them up, then no, you can't be who you want to be, right? Because,
Mhm.
You're going to be with what her standards are. But my wife's not like that, we have similar backgrounds, so things haven't been rosy on her side. So she understands some of the anxieties that I have, which is important, because I do have anxieties. There are things that I just don't want to do because of that. But she understands that. She doesn't sit and rest on it. No, she'll work with me. She'll talk to me about it. And see me through it. But she does understand it. She doesn't have any preconcepts about who I should be. It's who I am, and lets me be who I am. So that's important. The fact that we are able to embrace each other. Because after 20 years, you've seen each other at the lowest of lows and the highest of highs. You know, and now you're just you're on we're not necessarily on cruise control, but you really are on cruise control. We've adjusted to each other to the point where we those boundaries that we came in with had been erased. There's no more need for them because those boundaries were just our coping mechanisms to keep ourselves secure. But once you find the security, then you can erase those boundaries and you can finally blend together. But yeah, that comes with time and work, and like that comes with time and the compromise. Because you got to be willing to see through all that stuff. And there's things that we keep locked up in each other. That we keep locked up even from ourselves. That takes more coping. Just to get out of yourself. That you even realize that even after a few years of you letting go, that you still are bound up in some ways about some things. She can see it, but you still are. It's just working, being consistent, like you said, going through counseling, and understanding that, like you said, you are just both people, and you're not the macho man, that image that you have in your head that, may have been instilled from you from whoever, in your childhood. You're not, you're not the loser, that your teacher told you about in school, you're not that. If you go to counseling and you find that security within each other to let those boundaries go, then you finally can be the person that you were meant to be. But there's still a lot of work, and even in that, because those are raw feelings,
Yeah,
those are
sure.
real raw feelings. When you are the person, when your life lets you be the person that you are being, you're kind of like set back to like teenage years, where the wrong thing, can cut deeply because that's really who you are. You don't have any more armor on, you don't have any more shields on, you are being who you are. And if you are who you are, you're just flesh and bone. You say you did something wrong, man, that's a cut, you know? But if you understand that your relationship is solid and that your wife loves you and that, that criticism, if you are in that position where you are finally free, that the criticism comes from a place of love and it's not correcting you, it's just trying to help you shift your direction, then it doesn't cut as deep as it, usually would. But you got to have that security.
Man, every once in a while we have a guest on that just has so much value that it's hard to, want to stop, right?
Listen,
But
I want to ask all the things for sure.
I know. I mean, we could easily go for another couple hours on this, man. Um, but what I'm going to say is my wife is going to want breakfast soon.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes, she
we're,
is.
we're in New Orleans, and she texted me last night of what she wanted for breakfast this morning.
what you got?
It's a continental breakfast. Eggs, bacon,
Oh, okay.
the works. So I'm gonna go deliver on that for
Yeah,
her.
yeah.
But first of all, I wanted to thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely. And guys, I don't take pictures or anything. So, and you see me like squirming. You see me squirming, and
Yeah, we appreciate you, man. Your time definitely makes me mad that we didn't get you on earlier. But now that
Right?
we've done this, we're definitely going to get you on again because I'm sure you have so many different perspectives on life and marriage. So I appreciate you taking the time on your vacation, both of you, to sit down and still do this episode. So yeah, we'll definitely do that. So yeah, if you love this episode and you love rocking with us, make sure you please hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, just searching Marriage is Tougher, or hit us up on our website. If you have any questions about this episode, slide in the DMs and Instagram will answer that, and we can get Blair to answer any questions that you have as well. So we just thank you for rocking with us, and we will talk with you later.